Hello, welcome to Gimme Empathy. It's a podcast where I talk to people about their lives, about what they think and about what they do and how they do it. I'm Scott Mercer. Hello, I'm tired. I've had a big weekend. Satisfied tired though. Got a lot of stuff done. I had an EP launch for my weird little punk band Slumlord, and then we played a house party the same night. And then on Sunday, I called a game of football because the Brisbane edition of the RecLink Community Cup was on, and in my capacity as an announcer at community radio station 4ZZZ, I was one of the callers of the game, commentating from the box. And as you may or may not know, I don't know anything about sport. It's just an area of human endeavour that I've not put any skill points into on that particular table of interest. It's up there with religion and cooking and gardening, I think, and things that I'll probably never take a huge interest in. But I don't have a problem with people who do. But I was asked to commentate, and I thought it would be fun, and hopefully I didn't embarrass myself too much. I think my co-commentators definitely carried it, but it was a great day. And the RecLink Cup is it's like a big charity event. RecLink do some awesome work. They kind of tie together people in trouble and provide like sporting programs, cultural programs, and they really bring together, like the local music scene to a football game. So it's one of those things during the year, those big events where you see a lot of people from the local music scene all in the one place together, which is really exciting. And a lot of them were on the ground playing football because it was the musicians playing the media. A lot of fun. Now I'm very tired, and I still have a lot of stuff to do. I think Wednesday, the day after this goes up, if I've gotten through everything I need to get through, then I can relax a bit. But this episode is with Paul Macadam. And if you listen to the last episode with Bree Jones from the band Library Siesta, you will know a bit about Paul already. He plays bass in Library Siesta, as well as making his own solo music. He's put out 3 solo albums that he made himself. They're very, very good. This episode was recorded when Library Siesta were touring in Brisbane, because they're from Sydney. We had this chat immediately after I recorded the episode with Bree, and it happened out at the home of Ben Revy out in Salisbury. Thank you, Ben, for the use of your house. Much appreciated. We did a bit of a topic lucky dip in this one, as I do sometimes, where Paul picked a bunch of topics from a list that I provided. We put them into a hat, and as the conversation went on, we picked some of them out. And one of them was sport. I think I've only ever talked to my brother-in-law about sport on this podcast before, and it was an interesting conversation. Because Paul isn't necessarily the type of person I would pick to be a mad sports fanatic, but he's very into his rugby, so that was great. So please enjoy this episode. This is number. I never have the number in front of me. I always have to look it up. I usually cut out the bit where I look it up, but you're going to hear it today. Episode 38 with Paul Macadam. Just for a mic check, what'd you have for lunch, Paul?
I had a hamburger with a lot for $7, which is a pretty good deal, I reckon.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Was that just down at the cafe here?
Oh, a little bit further. Not the one right around the corner, but about a few hundred meters down. It was a little bit sloppy. Fell apart on me a bit, but that might have been more the perils of eating while walking rather than the structure of the burger itself. So I was very pleased with it. I would eat again.
Just hold it like so it's pretty close and point.
A bit closer. Yeah. I was wondering how to
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Oh, there's some. Oh, did that say something?
Hamburger with a lot.
Oh, there's some beautiful tones coming through. Some low frequencies that are doing things.
Cool.
So, Paul, we haven't really talked that much face to face in the past, but I feel like I know you somewhat well because last time we saw each other, last time Library Siesta were in town, you stayed at my place, but only since then have I started following you on Twitter and listened to all your solo albums, which I didn't even know about. I think Tim or Dan from Wheel Want To told me this solo stuff. And I was like, oh, really? And your stuff's like amazing.
Oh, thanks.
And so, but I feel like we can assume like a familiarity with each other that has not actually been established IRL yet.
Yeah. That's a very it's a very contemporary familiarity as well, because we've probably we haven't even spoken online that much really, but likewise I feel like I know you better than I possibly do through listening to your podcast. Like it gives you like a sense of people's, not just what they think, but like the way they speak. Not trying to make you self-conscious of it, but like just like little like unique bits of phrasing and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah. I get to know all my friends very well when I edit the podcast and find out who ums and ahs, who has complete sentences, who pauses a lot. Things you don't notice when you're actually talking to them, but you do when they're just in your head talking to another person. Yeah.
Back to the songs for a moment. I'm taking that as a good thing that there's a familiarity there, because I try to put a lot of myself into my songs without giving too much away, if that makes sense. But I do make a point of trying to make the songs conversational, like, and if there's dialogue in it, make it the way people actually speak as much as possible.
I feel your songs definitely have that, and I guess like I kind of cross-reference things I hear in your songs with things you talk about on Twitter. And in that overlapping Venn diagram, I'm like, oh, that's who Paul is.
Yeah. No, it's probably not that far off the mark. I mean, there's always a tendency to edit out the worst bits of yourself online, and I'm probably guilty of that as much as anyone. But put it this way, there's nothing I put online that isn't who I am, if that makes sense. Like, yeah.
So for the benefit of the listener, Paul, how do we know each other?
God, how exactly did we meet?
I can't remember exactly the first time I would have spoken to you, but I remember the first time I saw Library Siesta was when you came up and played with We All Want To, before I was in the band.
Yeah, just before. Yeah.
At Southside Tea Room, I think you were playing. And I was talking about this with Bree, so I bought a copy of whatever EP it was you were touring. It might have been Honey Love Time. And I met her there, but I left the actual CD on a table at Southside.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so when I got home, I had to buy it again on Bandcamp.
Yeah, that's the doubled contribution is appreciated. But yeah, I think we were having this a very similar conversation to this last night, but I'd had about 8 hours sleep across 2 nights, so I didn't process as much of it as I'd like to. Yeah, it's that's quite early on in the Library Siesta chronology that we met, but it seemed I don't think we'd seen each other in the last 3 years since our last visit here.
No, I don't think so. And yeah, so then after I saw you play, then my band Go-Go Fish was touring Sydney.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think it was Murray booked you on the lineup. I was like, oh, I know that band. They're awesome.
Yeah.
And I think we would have talked at that point.
We would have, for sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's 5 years, and we've only possibly only had about 4 conversations, which seems like a strange. But I've for some reason I struggle to remember how exactly people became absorbed into my life. I'm very good at remembering details of conversations, details of things they've told me that possibly even they've forgotten from years ago that have no real significance, but other than just amusement to me. But say if like 5 of my friends asked me how I met them, I'd probably only be able to give a coherent answer for like 2.
Oh wow!
I don't know why that is. Like it's I just don't like have strong for whatever reason. I don't have strong associations with the first initial meeting with someone. Maybe because I'm so stressed about trying to remember their name that everything else falls by the wayside.
I think part of that too might be a music scene thing, because it's hard to remember exactly when if you meet someone at a gig, it's like, oh, were that band playing, or was that the other time I saw that band, and were they?
Yeah.
Of details that can fog together.
And with people being in different bands as well, and Library Siesta's been through about 5 lineup changes since then as well, since the first time we met as well. So yeah, it's hard to place everything in order. But yeah, we do go back quite a fair way.
So are you currently the longest serving, apart from Bree, the longest serving member of Library Siesta?
No, that would be Eva, who joined. Bree and Eva were the original pair, going back to around about 2010. 2010. They might correct me on that later. Either 2010 or early 2011. I joined the band about, I'd say, late 2012 as a drummer. Since then, yeah, that trio has been ever present. But one of the main difficulties we've had as a band is getting everyone to be in the same country at the same time. So Eva spent a couple of years in Japan, back and forth a bit, and we've used the rare times we've had everyone in the same place, we've tried to use them as efficiently as possible. So yeah, I'm not the longest serving, but still the third longest serving, I guess now. Yeah, which is a fairly low bar to clear considering how many lineup changes we've had, but still. But yeah. What I'm saying is that trio has been together for quite a while, and the current lineup has. Yeah, it's about a year now. The current lineup's been in place. It's sort of complicated because Eva's gonna come back, and we're gonna turn from a 4-piece into a 5-piece. So, yeah.
And you've switched since the start from drums to bass.
I have, yeah.
Why did that happen?
I came to the drums more by convenience than than specialty, I'd say. It came about through Brie asking me if it just came up as straightforward as Brie asking me if I'd like to play drums in her band. We'd met about, 2 years earlier, originally at one of her house gigs. And she asked if I wanted to play drums because she knew that I'd played drums on my, at the time, most recent album, my first album, Coffee Break Bachelor. I'd played drums on that. So she just thought she'd ask me. And I said yeah, because I've been looking to join a band for quite a long time, but was very insistent on trying to find the right people, and I knew pretty early on that these were very much the right people. So I despite very limited technical ability on the drums, I stuck with it, got to a decent level, I'd say, without ever being able to hold the sticks in the correct manner. So as far as you can get without being able to hold the sticks in the correct manner, I'd say. Yeah.
So what? How come you're playing bass now?
I changed to bass around about 18 months ago for a couple of reasons. I'd got about as far as I could with the drums without taking up lessons and taking it as seriously as I could. And I don't have a kit at home either, which makes it tougher to practice during the week. So I think I'd hit a point where I wasn't going to get a lot better, and that was frustrating me. And also I was struggling to get the ideas in my head onto the instrument, which was also frustrating me. And I couldn't see that changing. And just maybe sort of accumulated resentment from just how impractical the drums are as a unit in terms of assembly and disassembling and all that sort of stuff. So I think a few things just wore away at me until I decided I just can't do this anymore. But I still wanted to be in the band, and it worked out at a pretty good time in the sense that we'd had a few different changes of lineup in that time, but we found Georgia, our current drummer, and hopefully drummer for a long time, on around about the time that I'd reached sort of the limits of my patience with the drums. And bass is an instrument where I feel much more at home because I've been playing since I was 13 or so, and it's my hands and my mind are in sync far more with that than the things that you hit.
Was bass your first instrument?
No, guitar was. I started playing guitar when I was 5, which my parents were a bit skeptical, as you can understand. You think that they thought it might just be a passing thing where you pick it up for 6 weeks and then you get sick of it. But I was very insistent on wanting to learn, and I'm 26 now, and I've been playing ever since.
You're very good at the guitar.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I still feel like there are things that I can't do that you'd think that someone who'd been playing for 20 years would be able to do, just like shredding and all that sort of stuff. But I just don't have the fine motor skills for it, perhaps. But thank you.
You do, but you do that finger picking shredding, like more. You do the Elliott Smith shredding rather than the Brian May shredding.
Yeah, there are different ways to shred.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of them. I suppose I find my own version of it that doesn't require. It's more right hand than left hand shredding, I'd say. And
yes.
for a right handed guitarist, I mean, like by that I mean I don't want to assume too much knowledge, but for like it's more. I do more work in my finger picking hand than in my fretting hand.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. What was it about Brie and Eva that made you think they were the right people to be in a band with?
Many things. I'd already got the idea that they were really nice and genuine people through meeting them at what would have been one of the earliest Library Siesta shows at a house gig they played back in 2010. I'd got a good vibe from them then, and I feel like I have a pretty good radar for people in terms of I try not to write them off if I don't like them on the first meeting, but if I do like them upon first meeting, it usually turns out to be a well-founded gut feel. So I had that for starters. I was really drawn to the style of music at the time, which at the time is quite different to how it is now. Like I'd say Library Siesta at the time was sort of more like a, I don't know, lack of a better term, twee pop kind of band, which I was a style of music that I was really into at the time, which helped as well. Like a lot of kind of Vaseline's vibes and that kind of stuff. And so that helped. And I think the very first thing I said to Eva was that sounds like the Vaselines in a good way. But there was that. And I think the most important thing about finding bandmates and staying bandmates is being able to be friends with them. I know it sounds like a dead obvious thing to say, but that isn't always the case, and it's not as easy as you'd think. And you have to be able to spend quite a lot of time in confined spaces at times with the same people and not get sick of them. And I never have, so that's a credit to them, I think.
I wanted to ask you about an extraordinary act of friendship on Bree's part towards you, a certain birthday present she made you one year.
Yes.
So I talked about this with Bree. So she wrote and recorded an EP all by herself called Fuck You, I Won't Do What You Tell Me, Paul.
That is the title, yeah.
Directed towards you, that was filled with everything in music that you hated.
Correct.
So she put on a Library Siesta song that you hadn't wanted to record for the album. She made a song with the word bed hundreds of times after you complained that there were too many beds in a different song. She recorded a cover of one of your favorite songs, Common People by Pulp, and massacred the words.
All true.
And what was the last one?
The one that all but encouraged me to move to Melbourne.
Oh, yeah, the Melbourne one.
Yeah.
And you hate songs about moving to Melbourne?
Not so much. It was more at the time, I'd had a spate of friends move from Sydney to Melbourne, and while I understood their reasons for doing so, I ended up there was a time there where I had more friends in Melbourne than I did in Sydney, which is quite ludicrous, but bit of a running joke of me resenting Melbourne, probably more than I actually do, but yeah, playing it up, hamming it up.
So how did you react when Bree produced this EP for you?
Just amazement, really, like of the positive kind. Just because spite plays a role in a lot of my, not in my actions necessarily, but a lot of, like I tend to feel a lot of resentment and spite in not towards individual people, but towards a lot of it's channeled through music in the sense of certain things that I don't like about. Like I'm very particular about the things that I don't like about music are very specific and hard to pin down at times. But I should clarify that, and that I'm not like, I don't feel that I'm a particularly nasty or vicious or even spiteful person necessarily. But like I find that spite can operate in ways that at its best, it operates in ways that don't harm anyone else and ultimately only inconvenience you, if anyone. Like you know, going out of your way to prove a point that only sabotages yourself. That's the kind of spite I specialize in. And the Bree wasn't sabotaging herself on that EP. I'm not trying to put that across, but I felt it was apt that the EP had a lot of things that probably no one else would have noticed or picked up. Like a lot of like kind of in-joke kind of things that related to specific pet peeves of mine.
Like every song being in the key of C.
Yeah, things like that.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of multiple songs in a row being in the same key, and that's what she did. And the Common People cover is something else because it's I've not been able to hear the original song quite the same way since. I don't, not in the sense that it's ruined it, not at all, but I can't hear it without thinking of that now, which gives it an amusing kind of twist.
I don't think I can hear Because Everybody Hates a Tourist without laughing.
Yeah.
The original version now.
Yeah, or like all the lines that pop up in funny places, like the Yeah, but like that refrain of "because you think that poor is cool" being the refrain rather than "want to meet common people like you." Yeah, just little silly things like that I can't. It's probably been good for me because I invest so much and I attribute so much to that song in terms of really changing my life in a way, in the way I see the world in subtle ways. Like it put me on a course that I probably would have got to eventually, but it might have taken me a few more years, if that makes sense. Like in terms of just looking at the ground a bit more than the sky in the sense of songwriting, making sure you don't like analyzing your own reasons for liking things and making sure that you're not like trying to claim things that aren't yours and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of like good kind of, I don't know, like there's a few little political points in the song that you wouldn't say it's a political song explicitly, but it put me on to a few ideas that would have taken me more time to get to.
Just in terms of the lyrics?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mainly the lyrics, but I mean the striking thing about the music is that it's only a 3-chord song, and I don't think it would have worked if it was a 7-chord song, for instance.
Yeah,
because there's so much packed into the verses, especially in terms of this description, not only of this character in the song, but her worldview, the world that produces that worldview, and yeah, sometimes you need a simpler tune to carry a complex or reasonably complex message, and I took a lot from that as well. I'm not trying to say that I have really profound things to say, but it's a good point to observe, I think.
Have you ever thought of making your own EP for Brie?
I have. I just don't know how I'd be able to top it, really. Yeah, I'll have to think about it. Yeah, because I've been stuck. Actually, I've been stuck on what to do next in the sense of my solo stuff. I don't know whether to do a 4th solo album or try to form a band as a channel for that solo stuff, or to form a band from an additional band, like as more of an outlet, but with equal creative input or something like that. I don't really know what to do. So maybe that could be my next project. Yeah.
Form an actual band
for the EP.
For the EP. About all the musical things that Brie hates.
Yeah, I'd have to, and I know them quite well. I don't want to go into them too much because there's probably more listeners won't know either of us than those that do. So, but yeah, that'd be that's something I should really look into. Like try to make a list and try to tick off as many as possible.
Yeah,
in 15 minutes.
So all your 3 solo albums, did you record like everything on them yourself?
I'd say about 95%, not everything. For instance, on the most recent album, again, Brie sings vocals with me on the 2nd song, Predisposed, from the album Free Cheeseburger if the Sharks win. And otherwise, I think everything on that album is played by me. Probably, yeah, there's one or two contributions just on like, even if it's just like a bit of percussion or something from other people, but I'd say mostly myself, yeah. For guitar, bass, drums, and bits and pieces elsewhere.
When you made the first one, Coffee Break Bachelor, it was like, what were the circumstances around that? Because it almost seems like, was it a uni assignment or something?
No. It was of the time of my first. It was released just after I finished my first year of uni, so like the end of 2010. Most of the songs on it were written a year early in my last year of high school in 2009. So the circumstances of it were kind of a mix of, it caught me at a transition point in my life, probably more than anything else I've done, and maybe something else will come up later in my life, I don't know, but at a very formative time between high school and university, which isn't, I know that cutoff point isn't the same for everyone, but for me, I just went straight from one into the other. So it kind of captured bits of both worlds and feeling caught between them and not really belonging to either.
It does kind of, like, there's half of it is a bit post-punky, and it's like, oh, there's a Jesus and Mary Chain song, oh, there's a Joy Division song, and the other half is moving into folkier kind of Elliott Smith, Beatlesy.
Yeah,
stuff.
That's a good point, because, and yeah, that pointed out something that I hadn't really noticed, that the spirit of Psycho Candy in the album, like the second track on it, for instance, that comes from the year 12 side of the tracks, and the folkier songs tended to be more a product of the times of early university and second year uni and that sort of stuff. That's where those songs are probably much more reflective of where I've ended up going since.
I feel like you're really good at evoking previous eras, like with just a little, like all your guitar tones are really on point. And just like, a touch of reverb on the vocals in the right way. It's like, oh, this is one of those songs, like on Jack Kerouac, which was not an album track, but it's like, it seems to me it references almost the entire Beatles catalog and various bits.
Yeah, thank you. I'll take that all day. One of many things that fascinates me is trying to figure out not just how things sound, but how to get them to sound that way yourself, and like the attention to detail in that sense. Not so much in terms of gear. I'm not really a gearhead, and it doesn't really appeal to me that much. And I don't, even if it did, I don't really have the budget to accommodate that to the extent that I need to. Or even like just stupid stuff about, say, like 60s records, like the way they're like mixed in that in the stereo sense. But even though it's not reflective of how they would have sounded to people at the time, because they were mixed in stereo more after the fact than at the time, so that the stereo mixes often of like Beatles tracks often have the drums way off to the left or way off to the right, and the bass like radically on the other side. But I kind of like that, and the strange combinations it throws up. And I try to not so much now, but there's a lot of it on my first two albums, and on that song in particular. I think the bass is right over to one side, and the guitar's completely the opposite in the right ear. So yeah, things like that I really love trying to channel.
I remember when I was in high school, and did you ever do the thing of like where you'd go around with in my day it was a Discman. One of us had Discman, and you'd share earbuds with your friends.
Yeah, there was a fair bit of that.
Like I remember listening to Eleanor Rigby with just the left earbud. My friend had the right, and like I was only hearing John.
Yeah. That's back in those days. I only ever really had those one earpiece experiences with music made since probably the year 2000 or so.
Yeah.
So that everything's a bit more evenly distributed in terms of like you still get a bit of everything. I wonder if that's part of the thinking of modern mixing, like to be able to like make it more shareable with friends, maybe like
possibly, yeah, or even on like a stereo. Like if one speaker stops working, it's not too much of
that might be a factor more than you could ever get anyone to officially admit. Yeah.
So Paul, I asked you to pick some topics.
Yes.
For a lucky tip we're going to do. So I gave you a big list of topics that I sometimes give guests to talk about, and we've chosen 10, and we're going to pick a few out of a hat at random.
Yep.
So here's the hat. Please pick a topic.
Our first topic is, of course, sport.
Sport. Now, I know you're a sports fan.
Very much.
I know this because I follow you on Twitter at Flat Above a Shop, and you're often up at odd hours of the night tweeting about soccer or footy.
Yeah.
Are those the main two sports?
The main two, certainly. Yeah. I honestly, I don't know how anyone finds the time or emotional energy for more than about 3. I feel that if you're gonna commit yourself to something, you've got to. You might as well give as much of yourself to it as you can. Yeah, but yeah, rugby league and soccer would be the main two sports that I watch. Yeah.
Do you come from a sporting family?
No, not really. Both of my parents played tennis at a decent level. Not certainly not professionally, but they were on like amateur circuits in the Sutherland Shire and that around. For non-Brisbane listeners, the Sutherland Shire is about, say, half an hour south of the Sydney CBD. So they were both solid tennis players until I got in the way and they stopped playing. But, sorry, Mum and Dad. Not really though. Not really a sporting family in the sense of like they weren't sports fans. I wouldn't say. Well, my dad was in rugby league, but not like I could have easily gone through my childhood without developing an interest in it, put it that way. Like it wasn't like I didn't grow up in a household where you couldn't avoid it.
I don't know how to put this, but you don't seem like the other interests in your life and the other things like you talk about, you don't seem like you would be a mad rugby fan. So how did you become a sports fan?
Probably just the right things happening at the right time. I first started watching rugby league when I was 7, so that would have been in kind of like early 1999. Went to my first game, which was again partially back to the convenience thing. It was basically went to the nearest ground because I wanted to go to a game, and that was the home ground of the Cronulla Sharks.
Do you remember why you wanted to go in the first place?
I don't actually. No, I was just sort of I'd seen a few games on TV, and I suppose I thought, oh, that looks cool. I'd like to be a part of that and see what it's like at the because. But I find that strange that I was really insistent on wanting to go because I was a real homebody as a child, like to the point where my parents were genuinely worried about me in a social sense and had to force me out, quite literally kicking and screaming at times to like. Swimming activities when I was a toddler or whatever. So I wasn't a kid who wanted to get out all the time and explore the world, and I'm still having to push against the lazier aspects of myself today. But like, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to have a day out and see what it was like, and I really liked it, and kind of developed from there. I haven't been. It's not like an obsession that's never let up or anything. Like it goes in like peaks and troughs in my life. Like other things have got in the way at times, and I'm maybe moving into one of those again now, where like I don't know, I want to maybe focus on my music more. But like it's never not an important part, I'd say.
Did you ever play yourself?
Not rugby league, no. I played soccer for quite a few years, from about say 11 to 17. I'm not to any. I'm not a good sports person myself, like or an athlete in any sense of the word, really. I could put in a decent cross, so they moved me out to fullback, but that was about all, really. So I played for a few years, but not really. I'm not any good at it myself. Yeah.
So I'm going to sound very ignorant in this part of the conversation because I don't follow any sports at all.
That's fine.
So do you have like favorite teams in? Let's start with rugby. So like, do you have teams that you follow and you barrack for?
Change the plural to singular there. I don't think I could possibly support more than one in any one sport. In rugby league, the Cronulla Sharks and the Cronulla Sharks only and strictly only.
Always?
Yes.
The Sharks?
Yeah. I mean, there are other, I find at least, there are other teams you kind of find yourself liking more than others or disliking more than others for various reasons, whether that be geographical proximity, which is often a condition of rivalry with another club, or it could be, I'd say the two most common factors in two clubs or fan bases disliking each other is, geographical closeness, and the closer you are, the more intense that is, and periods of history where you've been either successful or competing for the same titles at the same time, which naturally kind of leads to a resentment of those on the other side. I'm a one club supporter. I don't really see how it could be any other way, really, just by the nature of it.
Is it like that for most sports fans? They pick one team and stick with that?
Do you mean per sport or overall?
Overall, I guess.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a Cronulla Sharks fan in rugby league and a Liverpool FC fan from soccer. So from the English Premier League, that is. But those are the only two. Put it this way: if I had, I couldn't. I don't think I'd have time or energy in my life for a third club sport commitment. Put it that way.
So Cronulla, I understand geographically. So that's that's near the Shire, right?
It's in the Shire. It's about. I've never lived further than say 15 minutes or 20 tops from Cronulla.
So I can see why that would be one of your teams.
Yeah.
How does Liverpool, a club on the other side of the world, become the team you barrack for?
It's a fair question. It's difficult to talk about Australian soccer or football. I'll say soccer for the sake of it. Australian soccer fans supporting English teams without talking about Australian football or soccer at here. It was only really in the mid-2000s that a fully organised league with everyone pulling in the same direction came. There was the National Soccer League for a long time before then, but it was only really when the A-League came in I think the 04-05 season that it really felt like Australia had a proper national competition with like appearing on TV and stuff like that. So it was possibly it just came along slightly too late because by then I was 13 or 14, and throughout my teens I sort of lost interest in sport a bit. and it kind of fell by the wayside for a few years. So that came in at a time in my life where I wasn't too receptive to new sport-related things. If I had, I'd probably be a huge Sydney FC fan, for instance. But even then, and people have asked, not maliciously or anything, but it's a fair question, like, why don't you support your local club? Well, because Sydney, by English soccer standards, Sydney FC are not my local club. They're based primarily in the CBD and eastern suburbs, and they seem to, and while they do have a significant fan base in the Shire, any second Saturday night, you'll see a lot of sky blue jerseys heading into town. It just doesn't feel like mine. But which then begs the question: why does Liverpool? Probably I can't pinpoint a precise moment that I became a Liverpool fan. Like it doesn't really, like, it didn't happen as, like, I didn't just, like, spin a wheel, and I didn't pick one out of a hat. Put it that way. I really don't know. I've always had a for as long as I've been conscious of soccer, I've had a kind of soft spot for them. But it wasn't really until about 5 or 6 years ago, I think, that I really got into following them and supporting them. Probably around sort of like early 2013, early to mid 2013. It happened in stages, I'd say.
Do you have friends who are sports fans?
I do, yeah. Not that many, and they tend to not be like. They tend to be sort of scattered rather than in a group. Like I've probably got, say, I don't know, 3 or 4 friends who are, maybe a couple more actually, 4 or 5, say, who are interested in sport. But it's not really like, maybe it's the circles I move in, but it doesn't seem like the kind of thing that comes up in conversation all that much, or that you can, because a lot of, for context, a lot of my friends are musicians, and while some like music and sport, it's not. There's not. I don't seem to meet a lot of musicians who are really interested in sport as well. So it's not something you can really bring up without alienating 3/4 of the room a lot of the time. So I try not to push it on people.
I found that as well. Yeah, like I don't hear a lot of musicians talking about sport, and when I do, like there are a couple guys I know who kind of follow the cricket a bit, but you notice them if they might have a quick chat about it, but if they're in a bigger group, they'll kind of move off quickly because it's like they know no one else is interested.
You know where it stands in the conversational scheme of things. Yeah, and that varies according to. I mean, like, I feel you can talk. Sport gets discussed a lot more in the Southern Shire than it does, say, like in Sydney's inner west, like the more what's the Brisbane equivalent for local listeners? Say, like, I don't know, just like the more
affluent.
Not necessarily more affluent, more just a bit hipper and more with it.
More artsy and...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, like West End, probably.
Yeah. So, whereas I don't really... Yeah, you don't really hear sport discussed that much in the inner west, which I find interesting. I don't know why that is for sure, but yeah.
Does that ever alienate you?
It does a bit, because when people ask what you do, what you're interested in, it almost feels like it's certainly not something I'm ashamed of or in any way, but like you feel like maybe this is more my hang up than anyone else's, but I feel like it's hard to talk about being a sports fan without giving people certain ideas or preconceptions about yourself. So I don't know. I just I do find it a bit alienating for reasons that I find hard to articulate.
I guess it's a bit of a gamble. Like if they're not interested, then you might think, they might think less of me for being interested in that. But then the other side of that, like, have you ever been pleasantly surprised by, starting to talk about sports and the other person is also really interested in the same sport?
Yeah, that happens. That happens probably more often than the other way around. So it's not like there are never positive sides to it. Yeah, and I think it's at its best when, like, you can talk about it without that being the only thing you talk about. My friends who are interested in sport, whether it's I don't have any close friends who also support the Cronulla Sharks, which makes me a bit sad at times, because I don't really have that many people to go to games with. But like I have a few other friends who are rugby league fans of other teams, and we discuss it, reasonably often. But it's one of many parts of that friendship. It's not the only thing. I try to always make sure it's not the only part of my personality for everyone else's sake as much as mine.
So where do the Sharks sit in the rugby competition? Like, what kind of team are they known as? What kind of reputation do they have? If the Sharks were a band who would they be?
Oh, that's a good question. Before I can answer that, I'll give a really, really brief historical rundown for without boring people too much. The Sharks historically are the plucky underdog who everyone sort of feels a bit sorry for, but they're never quite. They get close to winning things every 5 or 6 years or so, but they never quite manage it. The club was formed in 1967 and only won its first premiership or flag in AFL terms, in 2016, so just 2 years ago. So it took 49 years to do the thing that pretty much every other club had already done by that point. There was a lot of historical baggage attached to the Sharks getting close to winning and then not quite doing it with teams that probably should have won it, and then a lot of years in between, like long spells of failure. And there are different ways to judge failure, but just like a lot of years where being a Sharks fan was a really miserable experience, and they were just so far off it, on and off the field as well. Like there was always some kind of drama happening. And even now, it never seems like there's more than 3 weeks without some kind of scandal of one kind or another.
So the UMI of sport.
Oh, that's a good one, actually. Yeah. Although UMI had a more commercially successful period that I don't think. Yeah,
they had some peaks, but they never really broke through all the way to the mainstream, I feel.
Yeah. Like the US never quite warmed to them,
yeah.
for instance.
They've gone through some down periods. There's been off-field dramas aplenty.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, that's a good one, actually. If I think of one later, I'll try and drop it back in. But yeah, I don't think I can top that. Yeah.
Is there ever anything that happens that makes you question your loyalty to the Sharks?
Not anymore, because I feel like no matter what happens, I feel like I've come too far to turn back. There've been times for sure where you wonder, like, why do I do this? Why? How much objectively better could my life had been had I been led to another team? So like, I'd be a profoundly happier person if I was a Brisbane Broncos supporter, for instance. Like I'd have like 6 premierships in my lifetime as opposed to 1, which is a significant difference in terms of memory forming. And
but are people whose sports teams always win, are they actually happier people?
That's a really good question. I don't. Yeah, that was a bit simplistic of me, actually, because with a culture of winning comes the expectation of winning, and the more successful. This goes for any sport, I think. The more successful, or any team sport, I should say, the more successful a club, the quicker to anger its fan base tends to be. Brisbane Broncos supporters, I really don't want to generalize, but as a unit, I'm talking not individual people, but as a unit, Brisbane Broncos supporters tend to turn on their team, not abandon their team, but like ask questions of their team a lot quicker than, say, Cronulla Sharks fans do. In fact, if anything, Sharks fans have been too tolerant of failure in the past. And like, there's an interesting anecdote a player made, a recent, since retired player made, who played for the Sharks, who said like, after a bad loss, they'd be walking through the local leagues club or something, and not all the fans would be saying, "Oh, well, you did your best." When maybe it would have been better if they'd been a bit more critical, because it might have shaken them out of it a bit. I don't know, but yeah, it doesn't necessarily follow that. Yeah, well, while ultimately, in the most cynical sense, sport is about winning, it doesn't necessarily follow that on-field success makes you happier, I don't think, because there are different ways to judge success, and different teams have different ambitions as well.
Do I do another topic?
Yeah.
Topic 2.
Dreams.
Dreams.
I was about to say pay envelope, which is on the other side of the
That's
page.
Yeah. I cut them out of my pay envelope. I was recycling.
Oh, good. Dreams.
I talked about dreams with Brie as well, actually.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, she told me about her sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
She mentioned a previous time on tour where you were also sharing a room where she had sleep paralysis and there were 2 of you, but you were also in the room, and she remembers you saying like, "Oh, for fuck's sake," or something like that. And she couldn't remember if that was something you really said in the room or if it was part of the dream.
It's something I've been known to mumble under my breath from time to time. So yeah, that much isn't. It's certainly, it'd be in character. I can't speak on behalf of either past me or sleep paralysis, someone else's sleep paralysis version of me. I don't know, but I find that fascinating though. All the same, that there were two of me for a moment. Maybe there is another one of me, and it's no, there's not. Yeah.
Can you tell if someone is experiencing sleep paralysis?
I don't think I've ever observed it. No, like I probably wouldn't know unless someone had already told me they experience it, which could lead to some unnecessarily panicky situations on my part, but it hasn't happened yet. But if I wouldn't really know what to look out for, no, because I've never experienced it myself. I've never really had the worst stuff in terms of sleep. The worst I have is like just struggling to get to sleep and keeping unhealthy hours, really. But I don't have any problems in terms of like not being able to move and that sort of stuff, which I'd find quite horrifying. But I suppose you'd get used to it after a while.
So you have trouble sleeping?
Yeah.
Getting to sleep or staying asleep or both?
It's probably more staying. Yeah, it's probably more staying asleep. And this is partially self-inflicted because I went through a couple of years where I'd set not just one alarm but a series of alarms, pretty much every day, regardless of how urgent it was that I needed to be up early, or early by my standards the next day. Early would have been like 11 a.m. really, but like the idea behind that was to try and keep like a semi-regulated time to start the day. The trouble with that was that I conditioned my brain to expect the alarm to the point where even on days where I didn't need to sleep in, even now I still struggle to sleep longer than 6 hours in a row, which is probably a legacy of staying up till 7 a.m. and setting an alarm for 1. Yeah, so that's an indication of it's been a bit better the last couple of months, actually. Like, it probably won't sound like much of an improvement, but I've been getting to bed and waking up about between 1 and 2 hours earlier the last month or so, which is something I'm going to try and stick to, because it does, even though it's not a lot, it just gives you so much more time in the day. And in my line of work, I'm a guitar teacher, so there's no real reason for me to be up at 7 a.m. in terms of like starting my day at 7 a.m. because I most days I don't start work till 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon, which has encouraged the negative patterns in terms of staying up because there's no reason to get up early. There's probably something to be said for having a reason to be out of bed before, I don't know, it turns into the afternoon.
So do you dream much, or do you remember many of your dreams?
I don't remember many of them. No, weirdly not. And the ones I do remember tend to be like not that remarkable. But there was this, maybe there's something. Although my dreams themselves aren't that interesting, maybe something that is, or I'm not sure if anyone else has found this, but I find that I don't have too many awful like I don't have that many nightmares, for instance, which is partially I've had the good fortune to not really experience any trauma worse than, say, your garden variety schoolyard bullying, but so I don't really like wake up in the middle of the night in a sweat for any reason, but I'm fortunate in that sense. But I think you can, and this could well be false, so don't take it as professional advice, but there might be something to be said for not obsessing over, but just thinking about bad or sad things a little bit during the day and making yourself less likely for them to appear in your dreams. Because I find that, like, I don't really get many, like, you know, sometimes people say like, oh, well, I had this really foreboding dream that, like, I think I'm going to start appreciating my loved ones more or anything. Like, I think about people dying, like people I love dying all the time. Not every day, but like it crosses my mind on a regular basis that I could lose anyone at any time, and they could lose me. Not in a way that I obsess over or like lose back to the previous topic, lose sleep over or anything. But it's I find that I don't really have distressing dreams because I get my dark thinking out of the way during daylight hours.
Oh, you're conscious.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But again, don't apply that to your own life if you don't think it'll work. But yeah, it works for me.
Did you ever, like, I think I had nightmares more when I was a kid. Did you used to have like full-on nightmares?
Not many, no. I never really had a fear of the dark. I had and still have a fear of heights, which is, I mean, that's you don't. It's not really often you encounter that. So it wasn't really an issue. I never really had there's no monster under the bed business going on, which isn't to say that I was a child free of neurosis or anything, but it was no, I didn't really. Maybe I'm airbrushing my past a bit here, but I didn't have that many dreadful dreams. I don't think when I was a kid.
How about anxiety dreams?
Oh yeah, that's something I have a bit more of nowadays. Yeah, like every sort of maybe say like 6 months or so, I'll have it. Maybe even a little more frequently. I'll have a dream about something related to a gig where I never dream about being on stage, but I often dream, or relatively often dream about the things leading up to being on stage. Like I'll have a dream that I've got to the venue we're playing and I've got none of my gear, and we're on in about 2 minutes, and I'm acting like it's the most normal thing in the world. So where's your stuff, Paul? Oh, I don't know. And then I've got to try and the recurring thing is a recurring theme is like I'm the one who's forgotten to bring something or left something behind or not done something I was supposed to do, which is probably a very banal and obvious way of my brain warning me not to forget those things in real life, I guess. But yeah.
Are you actually very organized in the band in real life?
I've gotten better. I could still probably improve on that front, but I'm better at, maybe as a result of those dreams, and maybe as a result of occasionally forgetting things for real. But I'm better at making sure everything's accounted for than I used to be. I think I don't really lose stuff that much anymore or forget stuff too much.
I have the opposite band anxiety dreams. I dream I am on stage and that I'm trying to play a song that I don't know, or that my fingers won't get to the fret for some reason. I'm just playing everything wrong.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to flip interviewer and interviewee too much. But do you find that do you ever have moments on stage where like you feel like your hands don't work, or like you're trying to avoid thinking about your hands not working or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, kind of. I think because I have had moments on stage when I've hit the wrong note and it's awful, and you just try and kind of grin through it. And you recognize that when you're watching a band too, especially if you're very familiar with their music.
Yes.
If they hit a bung note, and it's kind of endearing. I find it endearing to watch if a guitarist hits a bung note and you see them wince or like grin at the drummer. But when you do it yourself, it's horrible. I feel very embarrassed. But I've never been totally lost the way I am when I dream in a song and like have no idea. Lately, in a new band I'm in that's very fast, intense music, we have this one song at the end that's like anywhere between 7 and 12 minutes long. And it's at the end of a high energy set, and I actually struggle to play it because my arm gets quite exhausted.
I can imagine it would after that length of time. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the name of the band? Sorry,
Slumlord.
Oh, of course. Yes.
Yeah, it's a new thing. And that's frustrating because I know where I want to go, and I played it like this in practice, but my arm physically, like, it can't move that quick. It's just gotten so tired.
Yeah. When I'm playing solo, I find I have to structure my set lists in a way that allows me to warm up my hands a bit, because I've some kind of muscle weakness in my hand. Maybe it's muscle, maybe it's bone. I don't know. I've been trying to figure that out. I'm getting some physiotherapy for it. But my hands feel like they're sort of operating at like 75 or 80% of their capacity of strength, like a lot of the time, which is not good news for a musician and guitar tutor. So I've been trying to figure that out. But I have some days where my hands are quite painful. Most they're like tolerable, but occasionally, like when I've got to play, like my hands are quite sore, and I've got to try and structure the set list in a way that, even in general, I try to structure in a way that has like the more intense kind of finger picking, shredding songs later on, and a couple of easier strumming things to kind of allow me to ease my way into it a bit more.
Yeah, that's such a hard thing about set lists. Like, you've got your own priorities of where you want things for your own practical reasons, and then you also have to think of, like, everyone in the band has their own practical reasons for the order. Yeah. And then you got to think, what order would this actually be most entertaining to hear it in for the audience?
Yeah, there's all sorts of things. Yeah. Having played drums now in the past, I've more an appreciation for how draining it can be, and how the importance of alternating between physically demanding songs and more comfortable ones, because we've had gigs in when I was at the drummer, I found out the hard way that if you have like 3 or 4 really intense songs in a row, it takes it out of you. And I don't really have you need physical stamina that I don't really have in that sense to be able to do it, because and that varies according to instrument as well. So you got to consider 4 or 5 people's limitations. I don't mean that in a technical sense, but like just in terms of energy, you know.
Yeah. Should we go to another topic?
Yeah, sure. Morning and evening rituals.
So
I feel like for me this should be more like afternoon and dawn rituals.
well, yeah. If you keep odd hours, so if your sleep patterns are kind of all over the place, do you have rituals for when you are trying to go to sleep and when you do actually wake up?
For when I do go to sleep, I've figured out a bit of a way that, and again, it's not so much getting to sleep, it's more staying asleep. But in terms of getting to sleep, I found a couple of neat tricks. One I had recommended to me was not using your laptop or smartphone or whatever equivalent in the sort of 10 or 15 minutes before going to bed. I find that saves me a lot of tossing and turning. Yeah, that's really handy, because it just gives you that. I mean, even if I like set a reminder on my phone, I've got a really tiny phone, so it's not like a big screen reflecting it back at you. I find that helps in terms of just slowing your brain down. I try to keep my room and the surrounding rooms lowly lit as well in the sort of hour before going to bed, to try and because from the hours from about 9 p.m. to 3 or 4 a.m. my brain's thinking it's still daylight because I've got a light on somewhere in the house, and it's so like if you can try and gradually phase that out over an hour or so, that helps. I also find maybe I'm just using the wrong toothpaste, but when I brush my teeth just before going to bed, you end up having to like sort of like, although you've already washed the toothpaste out, you get this kind of like residual kind of like build up of like, this sensation of wanting to keep spitting. I don't know, like have you ever had that? You don't. No,
have I don't think I have.
Yeah. Of like,
Interesting.
and again, maybe I should just change my toothpaste, but yeah, I don't know if there's some kind of chemical in it that like, which I find that quite disruptive as well. And that can persist for about an hour or so after. So I try to clean my teeth a solid probably 2 hours before going to bed. Now that's helped as well. Yeah.
I think you're definitely right about, making it a real transition, a conscious transition between your active wakefulness period and then your in-bed period and then sleep. Like it's you can't just go from doing something that requires a lot of concentration and then just throw yourself in bed, because you're going to keep thinking about stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Like when I have a 9 to 5, which is actually 7:30 to 4, but close enough. But when I get home, I'm often doing work on unpaid work on hobbies and stuff, bands, editing the podcast, that kind of thing. But I find I need, like a half-hour buffer between when I finish, doing my homework and when I actually go to bed. So what I like, I find useful is putting on a nice, gentle comedy, just a half-hour sitcom, something very familiar and soothing to you. I find It's Gary Shandling's show is pretty good. Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is very, very nice. But you don't want something, you don't want to watch a show that's too active. Like I wouldn't watch Westworld or, God forbid, Handmaid's Tale before going to bed.
Yeah.
Then I read in bed for a bit. And I put, I'm a bit torn with this devices in bed thing at the moment, actually, because previously I've kept my phone charger in my bathroom, so I don't even have the option of looking at it either when I'm going to bed or in the morning. But I've recently started using this white noise app but just not because I need it if in silence. I can sleep in silence fine, but just for when my neighbors are talking.
Yeah.
And sometimes like my neighbors like to go outside and have a yarn, and one of them has a particularly piercing nasal voice that echoes all through the otherwise very quiet street. So I've just set up like 2 cheap speakers beside my bed, and I plug my phone in and put on like the sound of forest rain.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Did you? Not sure if we've ever discussed our childhoods before. I don't want to get too far off topic, but did you grow up in like a particularly quiet area or areas throughout your childhood? Because I've found that growing up in the Southern Shire, as I have for the most part of my childhood, from the ages of 3 to whatever. 2 houses, but both on very quiet streets with minimal, negligible amounts of traffic, and where the slightest sound kind of startles you, or like at least comes to your attention. And I found that living in more built-up environments has been tough to adapt to for that reason.
Yeah, I think most of my childhood, like my mum was living in Highgate Hill and my dad was at Annerley, and both of them had, I'd say, a moderate level of, like they're quite near main roads, so a moderate level of traffic noise throughout most of the day and night, but nothing too bad. And now I am on a quieter street, so I think you're right. Like, so anything that even you're just a person walking by talking aggravates me.
Yeah,
because it's otherwise silent. And I think living alone, you also get touchier about that as well. Like your space is your own castle, and you want to keep it exactly how it is, and outside noises are like an invasion and intrusion.
Yeah. I've never really lived alone at all, which is I don't know. I've had a few different experiences, like in share houses and that, where it's probably been good for me in the sense of like not just living closer to the city and closer to noise and getting used to that a bit more, because the Shire really has spoiled me in terms of my noise tolerance. Yeah.
I do think the type of noise, like sometimes regular background noise like cars, I don't mind. Traffic's fine. People talking is annoying. Things like appliances, washing machines, fans, dishwashers are soothing.
Right.
I like them. In fact, when I was a kid, I think I've talked about this in a previous episode. I used to put the fan on even in winter and just point it away from me.
Yeah. I remember you saying that. Yeah. Or hearing you say that rather.
Yeah.
Back to the train thing for a moment. There's I used to be put to sleep or assisted to sleep as a kid by like train noise, like a tape. It probably would have been like an old cassette tape of train noises and passing train noises. And I found it. I was living for about a month earlier this year in Sydney's Arncliffe, or just probably about 2 minutes or 3 minutes walk from Banksia Station, which is sort of like probably a bit north of the Shire and sort of halfway between the city and the Shire, if that makes sense, in Sydney. And it's the first time in my life I'd lived right next to a train station. And I found it really nice. Maybe there's some kind of nostalgic association with that cassette tape or something. But there were trains running, and even like goods trains and that running like right through the night, like at 3 or 4 a.m. And it didn't bother me at all. I found it quite comforting.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe also I found it nice that I guess I like being near trains because it makes me feel less isolated. And growing up in the Shire, especially in 2 suburbs that don't have train stations, crucially, I've often felt quite cut adrift from everything else and from the places I feel most at home at, other than my own home. So yeah.
Now, morning rituals. When you wake up, do you have my morning is the most structured part of my day. You can pretty much set my watch to my exercise, making lunch, shower, breakfast routine. Yeah. Do you have a morning ritual?
No, and I think that's where I let myself down a lot, because although my day might end in a fairly structured way, it absolutely doesn't start in that manner. No, I don't really have any kind of ritual for the morning. Well, it's probably and to be totally honest, it's probably more early afternoon really, because but at that point of the day, everyone else tends to be at work. I'm the only one home. You have breakfast. I tend to shower more at night, which maybe doesn't help in terms of getting to sleep as well.
Can you get out of bed pretty easily?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. I
guess by the afternoon, it's probably the hottest part of the day. So
yeah. Sometimes, quite often, I don't even need the alarm. It sort of just does the job for me.
Right.
But I could probably benefit from having more structure in my morning. But I've always felt that my brain doesn't really wake up properly until no matter what time I wake up, until I've been awake for a solid 3 hours or so, which is why I was sort of relieved when I heard that Brie was doing her podcast before mine, because it gave me an extra hour to, I don't know, go for a walk, get some sun rays into me, and wake up a bit.
I definitely can't really hold a conversation unless I've been awake for an hour.
Yeah. Talking at breakfast is it's just the worst. I can't handle it.
Do you eat the same thing for breakfast every day?
Yes, Wheat Bix. Usually about 6 or 7 Wheat Bix. I had 6 this morning with a bit of sugar and microwaved, which might horrify some people. But yeah.
I microwave oats and then I put Vegemite in it. So
Oh, yeah?
I don't think anyone's... I'm not one to judge.
That's all good. Yeah. No, I eat the same thing for breakfast pretty much every day to the point where like it must do my bandmates' heads in, the poor things, that my insistence on having Wheat Bix no matter where I go.
Well, they're always readily available.
Oh yeah. That has that advantage. It's not like you have to move heaven and earth to locate them. It's more the So like if you're in a city for a night or 2 nights, finding like the smallest possible measurement of milk to buy and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Milk is because it goes off quickly and you want to drink it all before you have to.
And also, I found that this might be the circles I'm moving. I'm always careful not to assume that the people I know are the whole world. But I find that a lot of houses I've lived in, like share houses or even like places I've stayed, have either been like predominantly vegetarian or vegan households, which is fine. The only problem with that is that like milk isn't really that easy to find.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it's not really I don't know. I feel like I'm sort of intruding a bit sometimes, bringing milk into their houses. So yeah, that's been a bit of an issue as well. But again, as has been a recurring theme, maybe a hang up more of mine than anyone else's. It's all in my head.
All right, let's do one more topic. Don't look in the hat. That defeats the purpose.
That's not how it works. We have commuting.
So there's no train stations in the Shire.
Oh, there are.
Oh, there are?
Just I've had the relative misfortune of not living in any of them.
Right.
Yeah. So I lived in Bonnet Bay, a suburb called Bonnet Bay, between the ages of 3 and 14. And I've had about 6 or 7 months here and there in share houses in the last few years, but mostly from 14 to the present. I'm 26 now. In Karilla, and neither suburb has a train station, but the nearest one's probably about 35 minutes walk away.
And do you drive?
A bit. I don't have my own car. I've my full license, so that's it's handy. It's handy for sure. But I don't have my own car because I just couldn't justify all the expenses that come with it, considering that I only really use it like twice a week. So I just borrow one of the cars available when someone's not using it.
So for your music teaching job, is that like at a school? Do you go to people's houses? Do they come to you?
The nature of the job, especially these days, it tends to be like you pick up bits of work wherever you can find them. It's not very centralized in the sense of like, oh, I have one place where I teach and that's it. I teach at a place in Sutherland in sort of like a music school, like in after school hours. I teach just one student at the moment, but I one at my old high school, a bass student. I teach a few at home, at my own home as well. And I'm looking to do a bit more of that actually, so I can, I don't know, just do things on my own terms a bit more. And a couple I go to their house for, which is one of them I go by car because it's just easier, and another I get the bus and train.
Is the Shire decently serviced by buses?
No, it's pretty shocking actually. The bus system. There are enough train. Put it this way: there are enough train stations in the Shire to cover most of the town. I'd say probably half to 2/3 of the Shire has a train station within, say, 20 minutes walk, which it's not great, but it's compared to other parts of Sydney, that's not too bad. So like north of the Harbour Bridge, you get like huge pockets of town that they're probably the area of the Shire that are just all buses or all like you're just relying on buses or ferries, which is, I don't know, ferries are all right, but like, you know, yeah, it's just not the same. So it could be worse, but it's not my ideal situation either. I like forms of transport where you can walk around a bit as well, which is why one of the many reasons why I prefer trains to buses. You have more the option of walking from carriage to carriage rather than it feels a bit more homely on a train than on a bus, I think, because of all the. And I know there's a bit of you got to be careful about what foods you eat on trains, but some people think you shouldn't at all, which I understand. But you can't so that you can't eat anything or drink anything at all on a bus, for instance, pretty much. So I don't know. I think Queensland's a bit stricter on that than New South Wales as well.
I think you're not supposed to eat or drink anything on a bus, but like I've done both.
Yeah. It just seems to be like more of a, I don't know. Like I've had bus drivers be really strict with that in a way that train drivers, or I mean, they can't because they can't, or even guards that wouldn't necessarily.
I mean, like I'm discreet about it. Like there's been a few late nights where I've, in a way that does no favors to my dignity, I have shoved kebabs in my pockets while getting on the bus, and then walking to the back and taking surreptitious bites under the chair.
Yeah. There are little sneaky things you can do. Yeah, but it's the problem. Yeah, I just find with buses that it's you always feel like you're adhering to so many rules that you don't really. I don't know. Like it just doesn't feel like a very relaxing way to spend half an hour if you have to. Whereas on a train, you can sort of forget where you are a bit more. That's why I far prefer trains, being on a train, to driving, for instance, because I think I'm a decent enough driver, but you can't even for a moment lose sight of where you are or where you're going or what's around you. Whereas when someone else is behind the wheel, you can indulge in that a lot more.
Yeah, I find driving quite stressful generally.
Same.
Like if it's a route you travel very regularly, it's okay. But going new places, like anywhere on the north side in Brisbane where the roads are all tiny and hilly and curvy, I don't like doing that at all.
Yeah, I don't really drive outside of the Southern Shire at all anymore. Really, I in that sense, I stick to what I know. I certainly go. I go out in the city and in the West a lot more than I do in the Shire. But like in terms of driving, I tend to keep it local. I had a pretty nasty crash a few years ago, which I wouldn't say radically changed the way I see things, because I was still catching a lot of trains and buses anyway. But put it this way, it wasn't a near-death experience, but I was lucky not to be seriously hurt. Put it that way. Like my car was written off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was about 4 years ago. And since then, I can still drive and don't, but I'm a lot more. I was always careful, but I'm even more careful about it now, and I try not to. I only drive if it's. I go to great lengths to not drive. Put it that way. Yeah.
Was that part of giving out drums for bass? Because I imagine like you always need a car to transport drums, but you could get away with taking a bass case on public transport.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Well, luckily, Library Siesta, the band I'm in with Brie, Eva, Georgia, and Bobby, who I've not mentioned up to this point. Shout out to Bobby. We've had many other members as well. Shout out to them also. Yeah, luckily, our drum kit is located at Library Siesta headquarters, so basically Bree's place. So which means that I don't really have. While I was the drummer, I didn't really have to bring anything with me. And even now as the bass player, usually my bass is left at the place where we rehearse, so it's not like I have to do a whole lot of holding stuff around. So I wouldn't say it was that closely related. But yeah, it's I've become more hostile towards not cars themselves, not people, and certainly not people who drive cars, because I do as well. But the Australia's mentality around cars, and it's especially noticeable in the Southern Shire, where like it's sort of built into the infrastructure, or like the planning of the town. It's built into the width of the footpaths, the unnecessary width of the roads. For even like suburban roads most of them are a lot wider than they need to be. Everything in the Shire seems to be built around cars and prioritising cars over pedestrians.
Yeah.
Which really annoys me more, and annoys me now more than it used to, I think.
What do you do when you're on the bus or the train?
Well, the thing is, sometimes I do some writing. Like I find it a handy place to do some songwriting, mostly lyric writing. I can't really. Obviously I can't have a guitar on me really, so I do a bit of writing on buses, usually or trains, maybe come up with a line, even just a line or two. I find it, being in motion helps sometimes when you just when I'm sitting still in my room, it's not really it's often not conducive to new ideas. But if you even if it's the sites you've seen a million times, just going past them at speed maybe helps you. I don't know, just maybe overwhelms your brain in a way that drives it to distraction and drives it to new ideas or thinking of new ideas.
Especially on trains, because they go like behind everything. So you get a view of stuff that you wouldn't otherwise get.
Yeah. Whereas on a bus, it's sort of like the same scenery, but with this relentless sort of grumbling, chugging sound in the background, the engine.
Buses are kind of cool in that you see things from a higher vantage point than normal.
Yeah.
Like you look down at people in cars, and like I find on buses, I often look at people in cars and see what they're doing. And
yeah, I often because I don't really, I don't own a smartphone, so which means that I don't really have internet in between. Well, just basically any time I'm out and not at someone's place, I don't have internet, which means that if any podcasts I listen to or something have to sort of be loaded or downloaded in advance, which is maybe good in a sense because it means once I've got them, I can listen to them anytime. But sometimes I listen to one of them. Sometimes I don't know. Yeah, as mentioned, do a bit of writing, maybe a bit of reading as well. Although you'd think it'd encourage me to read more, but like I get really lazy with books, and then in the sense that I start them, and then increasingly I find that I struggle to finish reading books. But sometimes, a bit of reading as well helps. So sometimes I just stare into space out the side. I know it sounds really, I don't know, not that interesting, but yeah, I find it a useful, and I don't mean this in some kind of infuriatingly white middle class Zen way, but it's just a nice time to think about nothing for a bit sometimes.
do you ever listen to music?
Not really anymore. Since ever since my iPod Classic broke down for good, that's sort of changed the way I listen to music, and it tends to be more at home now, which is a pity. No, I don't really listen to that much music. Occasionally, I'll maybe every now and then listen to a music podcast, like with like new songs and that, but not a lot. No, I find that's music's become more of a home environment thing rather than.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I think I'm the opposite. I rarely listen to music at home, except while I'm exercising. And even then, it's always stuff like when I'm out and commuting. That's when I listen to new music. Whereas at home, it'll most likely be something I'm already familiar with, like because it'll be on a record or a CD or something.
Yeah. It's funny how, just where you are can shape what you feel like listening to.
So you don't have a smartphone. Is that a conscious decision?
It is. I'd like to be able to say it's for some kind of ethical, anti-corporate reason. But in reality, it's more because I'm just terrified of them and terrified of like having everything wrapped up in one place in terms of which I completely see the advantage of like having multiple the advantages of multiple devices rolled into one and all that. But I know how my mind works, and I know that'd just make me triply or quadruply terrified of losing it or having it broken or something.
Oh, so it's not about, you're not worried about how much time you would spend on it?
I am. That too. I do find it nice to have a few hours away from the internet because Lord knows I spend enough time on it as it is. So that's nice as well. It's not for really high-minded reasons. It's just maybe that's where a bit of my spite kicks in as well. Actually, I don't think I got it across that point across very well before, but I don't know. Like I feel like I'm trying to maybe on some level I'm trying to prove some kind of ridiculous point by sticking with this phone that belongs more to 2002 than the present day.
I think I was like that for a while. I was fairly late to getting a smartphone, and I was a bit worried about, if I can access everything all the time, I'll never get anything done. But it became a bit of a necessity just in organizing stuff, like band stuff, and I probably still do spend too much time on Reddit and stuff. I'm still pretty good at. At least I've improved at organizing things, in that like I put a lot of reminders on my phone to the point where I don't really write things in my diary anymore, and my phone's kind of like the main tool I use for keeping my life in some kind of functioning order, which is maybe not a good thing. I don't know. I mean, in essence, it's doing the same thing. It's just part of it is because when it comes down to it, I'm a bit of a cheapskate, really, as well. I'm very stingy with not when it comes to like shouting things or like generosity.
Yeah. I don't think it applies to that. It's more just for like my own stuff. I resist buying things that I have to buy far longer than I should, and then go to great lengths to inconvenience myself to avoid spending money on things that I should just suck it up and buy to save myself the pain, but I don't, because again, I'm trying to prove some ridiculous point.
I think I'm a bit like that as well. Like there's some stuff in my life I do all the research on before I buy. I buy the very best that's perfect for my needs and stuff, like the Zoom recorder. We're using it now, for example. Other stuff like I've not bought a new t-shirt, probably in 10 years that doesn't have a band logo on it.
Oh, right. Right. Yeah.
And a lot of these band shirts, like they're not the best quality. They wear out, they get saggy. So I can't really wear them out. Sometimes I'll buy an op shop shirt, but it just, none of my jeans, look good on me. They all have holes in them. There's definitely some areas I'm that way, I think.
All my jeans are too loose. I've got to the point where all my jeans are either too loose or too tight. I don't have a waist that should cause any problems. I have no ass to speak of. I don't know what it is, but I'm at a similar point where like I seem to have all the same clothes I did since in about 2014, or 2012.
Oh yeah. I've still have some stuff from high school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still have the same socks I bought when I went to Europe 12 years ago, which were really good socks.
Yeah.
They're like those, I think, Explorers or something. They're super thick, but I wear them even in summer just because they're so comfy and they never wear out.
Yeah, that's 12 years. That's it's more than you get out of some guitars. I mean, that's really good.
Some of them are getting a few holes in them, and I've lost like one or two, which is why one odd sock is now the filter on the microphone I'm currently using.
Oh, right. Yeah. I've been, it's been in my peripheral vision for about an hour and a half now, and I didn't notice that. But yeah,
You have a real filter.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't designed for the 58. It was actually for the built-in mics on this Zoom. But I thought I would not give my guests a old sock. I did wash it before I started using it.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. I'm not above a sock mic. There's your title. There's your episode title.
That's a great one, actually. Well, thanks for talking to me.
Not a problem, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to play a song now?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to play a song I wrote called Cartoons from the 90s. Hey man, do you remember that show? What was the theme tune? How did it go? It had a horn section, I'm pretty sure. You'll never guess what the producer's doing now. Classical music articles, he's gone all highbrow. Shame they don't show it on Foxtel anymore. It's fine to keep a few little pieces of your childhood, but most cartoons from the 90s weren't really all that good. Did you hear they cancelled Video Hits? Used to watch it all the time when we were kids. Bro, I swear those days were the best.
Thanks, Paul.
Not a problem.
If you want to hear more of Paul's fantastically observational and beautifully composed music, he has 3 albums that you can stream online at SoundCloud. Coffee Break Bachelor, Macadam 2, and Free Cheeseburger If the Sharks Win. They're all fantastic. You should go check him out. He's a funny guy. So funny, in fact, he also is on Twitter. @FlatAboveAShop is his handle. He tweets a lot about rugby, but I follow him anyway. That's how funny he is on Twitter. You can also find all of Library Siesta's music up on Bandcamp as well. Thank you for listening to this episode. As always, you can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, @Gimme Empathy Podcast. Send me an email, gimmeempathypodcast@gmail.com. Rate us on whatever thingos that happens on. Or, more importantly, just tell people about it. And if this is one of the first or perhaps the first episode of Gimme Empathy you're listening to, go check out some of the previous ones. There's a whole bunch of them now. They are backing up like slugs in a garden that you've fenced in, so they're all backing up. There's a bunch. You probably won't know a lot of the people necessarily. I think the only person who would know all my previous guests is me, because it's my podcast. But I guarantee you that everyone is interesting, and every conversation is special in its own way. So go check it out. All right, I got some things to go do now. I need to, let me think. I need to do my APRA return. Need to listen to some mixes, work in progress mixes of the new Harley Young album. Very exciting. And do the ironing. And at some stage need to eat dinner. So I'll go do that, and you go live your life. So until next time, stay alive. Yeah.